coronavirus crisis, what the Trump administration is saying about a possible method to help fight COVID-19. We're at the White House. A ministry of joy. A report from Rome on the Vatican's new guidelines for priests who perform exorcisms. Fight for the unborn. Mexico's Supreme Court weighs in on an attempt to legalize abortion in the Catholic country. And faith and politics. A representative from Illinois tells us about his conversion to Catholicism in his 30s. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, July 30th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight, President Donald Trump's coronavirus task force is urging people to donate convalescent plasma. It is about hope and possibly saving lives. Coronavirus task force member Dr. Deborah Birx spoke directly with EWTN News Nightly. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
That's right, Tracy. Today here at the White House, I spoke with Dr. Deborah Birx of the Coronavirus Task Force, who told me just how important it is to donate convalescent plasma to protect people against COVID-19, which just took the life of a man who once ran for president.
Well, we're all saddened by this.
White House Deputy Press Secretary Brian Morgenstern reacting to the news of Herman Cain's passing. The 74-year-old former presidential candidate and co-chair of Black Voices for Trump battled COVID-19 for weeks.
Raise the roof.
Herman Cain, I had a chance to speak with him a number of times. He was a kind man. He was a success, and he wanted everyone else to be a success. He was really a true patriot, and we're saddened by his loss. Our hearts and prayers are with his family.
In an effort to prevent more deaths from the virus, Dr. Deborah Birx says Americans who've had the illness themselves can help.
And in this case, we're asking people that have gotten over COVID-19 to come and donate their plasma to help others recover.
The goal, get those antibodies, convalescent plasma. There's no guarantee it works, but it's being assessed very closely.
We know it's safe, and we think it, by history, we know it should work.
Dr. Birx also says a face shield is another level of protection that can be added.
That would prevent those droplets from hitting your eyes or other parts of your face when you're close and speaking to someone. But I always say the safest thing you can do is to be 6 feet away from the person.
The pandemic is also pounding the economy. The U.S. just suffered its worst quarterly plunge ever when the lockdown was in full swing.
We still think the second half of the year we will do quite well. We've had record job creation the last couple of months. We think that the upward trends will continue, and we think the American people will be in a much better position in the second half of the year.
A powerful voice of freedom and an American patriot is how President Trump described Herman Cain on Twitter today. Tracy?
Okay, thank you. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. The family of murdered Fort Hood soldier Vanessa Guillen met President Donald Trump at the White House today.
Y yo quiero que usted me ayude a llegar a la verdad,
She just wants your help to get at the truth, to get at the justice, the truth.
It hit me very hard. I saw what happened to your daughter Vanessa, who is a spectacular person and respected and loved by everybody, including in the military.
Other family members were also at the Oval Office meeting. Vice President Mike Pence says the Trump administration will keep standing up for law and order and the police who enforce it.
The men and women of law enforcement are the best people in this country. Law enforcement isn't the problem. Law enforcement is the solution.
The vice president held a Cops for Trump campaign event in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. He repeated his message that burning churches is not protest and tearing down statues isn't free speech. The vice president's motorcade was involved in an accident on the way to the event, but he was not hurt. Democratic leader Chuck Schumer pushed today for the House's HEROES Act to pass in the Senate. The Democratic plan for COVID-19 relief, which passed the House in May, failed to achieve unanimous consent and did not pass. Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin voiced the objection that shot it down, citing the bill's $3 trillion price tag. Speaker Nancy Pelosi mandates wearing masks after a GOP congressman tested positive for COVID-19.
Members and staff will be required to wear masks at all times in the hall of the House.
Texas Republican Louis Gohmert often shunned wearing masks and was known to vote on the House floor without one. Congressman Gohmert tested positive before boarding Air Force One and is now self-quarantining. Right now, the U.S. Capitol has no testing program for COVID-19. The new mask mandate for U.S. House office buildings went into effect at 8 o'clock this morning. Taking another look now at the financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic amid reports that during the shutdowns, the U.S. economy shrank the most in recorded history. According to data from the U.S. Commerce Department, the nation's gross domestic product for last quarter plunged by an annual rate of more than 32%. That is the sharpest drop on record since 1947. Joining me now on Skype for more analysis is Joel Griffith, research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Joel, welcome back. Always good to see you.
Hey, thank you for having me tonight.
So, Joel, that's really a staggering figure, but thankfully not as bad as many economists predicted. What's your take on today's numbers?
Well, this is the sharpest contraction in a single quarter that we have ever seen in our lifetime. This is historic and in a very bad way. And if you look at this, if you go down sector by sector to see where this has been the biggest impact, it is really falling on the service sector. You see some of these hotels, restaurants, bars, services in general. You're talking about a 40% plus contraction year over year. That is absolutely devastating. And that's devastating for the people that work there. It's also devastating for the business owners, a lot of them who are going belly up, and this should really be a wake-up call to our governors and mayors that we need to safely reopen, but we need to reopen as quickly as possible because this carnage is really a nightmare for so many people.
Yeah, and we continue to see just how much the economy and the pandemic really are connected. Last week marked the 19th straight week that more than 1 million people applied for unemployment, as Dunkin', McDonald's, and Starbucks have announced a combined closure of 1,400 locations across the country because of declining sales. Do you think this type of news increases pressure on Congress and the administration for more fiscal aid? And furthermore, do you think that more aid would be helpful?
Well, there's no doubt that this is being used as an excuse to spend more, but it would be absolutely unacceptable and imprudent and unwise for Congress to spend more in a non-targeted manner. No, we've already seen upwards of $3 trillion plus between government spending and between the Federal Reserve printing money that's been dispersed. And there's trillions more that have already been authorized that have not yet been dispersed. What we have right now, it's not an issue of people not having enough cash in their pockets. If you look at disposable income in this report surged by 40% on an annual basis. People are flush with cash overall because the government has been dispensing so much money, but it's in people's pockets. They're not allowed to spend it. And that's why you saw income go up as you saw consumption plummet, because people they're not allowed to be out there. What we need is to reopen. We don't need more reckless spending. And unfortunately, both the proposal from the House and also from the Senate is filled with spending that ultimately is going to end up slowing our economic growth and runs the risk of a debt crisis for the country.
Well, Joe, we have less than a minute left, but any final thoughts?
Well, I think if you really dive into this report, you really see just some shock and awe. You look at durable goods. Durable goods, we actually saw pretty steady. That's things for like refrigerators, freezers, and automobiles. But this service sector, this is really, really something that we need to keep our eyes focused on. Until we're able to reopen, you're going to continue to see these folks unemployed. And so many of these businesses, they only have resources on hand to last a few weeks or a month or so without being open. And it's important that we be able to get people through those doors and reopen as safely as possible.
Well, Joel, thanks so much for your analysis. Always great to have you on. Joel Griffith, research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thanks again, Joel.
Thank you.
On New Jersey, Congressman Chris Smith demanded today that Chinese President Xi Jinping disclose the whereabouts of a Catholic bishop missing in China.
President Xi Jinping, where is Bishop Xu? What have you done in secret to this extraordinary man of God? There is a new concern that this good and holy man may have died or been killed, as Chinese authorities have asked the Vatican to appoint a new bishop. Please keep your video function on at all times.
Congressman Smith considers Bishop Xu to be a prisoner of conscience in China. He says the Vatican should demand the Chinese Communist Party reveal what has happened to the Catholic bishop. A dozen candidates for Hong Kong's elections are banned from running. Disqualified candidates say the regime wants to silence them.
Not only just to take away the basic fundamental rights and freedom that was once enjoyed by all Hong Kong people under the Basic Law as promised under the Sino-British Joint Declaration, but they also try to drive fear and oppression into our hearts.
The 12 candidates are banned because they oppose Hong Kong's new security law. The disqualifications are a setback for pro-democracy leaders. They were hoping to get a majority in September's legislative elections in Hong Kong. Meanwhile, activists on trial for protesting say they did nothing wrong, according to the UN.
Exercising our rights, and very clear United Nations Human Rights Committee said that there's no need to notify. Even if you don't notify, they should not criminal sanction you.
Lee and other pro-democracy protesters spoke out right before their court appearance today. The activists, including media tycoon Jimmy Lai and lawmaker Martin Lee, are facing trial for participating in an unauthorized protest in April and are accused of inciting others to protest. The annual Hajj pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia started yesterday, but it looks a lot different this year. Muslims are practicing social distancing while circling the famous Kaaba in Mecca. Everyone is wearing masks, gets tested for COVID-19, and is given wristbands to monitor their movements. This year's Hajj is scaled back significantly, with Saudi Arabia barring pilgrims from other countries. The Vatican has released a new book of guidelines for exorcisms conducted by Catholic priests. It says being an exorcist is a ministry of joy, light, and peace. With more details on these guidelines is Hannah Brockhouse, senior Rome correspondent for Catholic News Agency. Hannah, welcome back to the show. First off, how does the Catholic Church define an exorcism?
Well, Tracy, very simply put, exorcism is a prayer of the Church against the power of the devil. There are different kinds of exorcism prayers. Probably what most people think of when they hear exorcism is what is known as the major exorcism rite, which is when a priest or bishop says these special prayers of the rite to depossess someone of a demon.
So what do these new exorcism guidelines say, and why exactly were they released now?
Well, these guidelines, or this book, was released after a process of several years. There were some revisions to the exorcism rite, and there were questions that exorcists had in different parts of the world. So this book is a response to those questions. One of the main subjects of the book, although it covers a lot of topics related to the ministry of an exorcist, is that of discernment. And that is because demonic possession is actually quite rare. There are many types of demonic activity in the world, but the actual possession is rare, and it requires a lot of discernment on the part of any priest who is encountering someone in their parish with problems that they think could be related to that. And then for the exorcist priest as well, discernment to realize, is this really what's going on with someone, or could it be something caused by natural causes? So that's something that they'll look into, and that's something the book addresses.
Hannah, does the book address any common misconceptions that people may have about exorcisms?
Yes, in fact, one of the main misconceptions it refers to in the introduction to the guide is that of kind of the Western view, the view you might see in a film, Hollywood movie, for example, of this kind of dark, mysterious, very kind of negative characteristic. And instead, in the introduction to the guide, it talks about how exorcism is actually a positive thing, and how these prayers, when done by the proper exorcist with prudence, with the church, and with faith in God, then how this experience of exorcism can actually be one of positivity, of light, of peace, and of joy as well. There's also the misconception that exorcism is almost like kind of an anti-magic. It's something that's kind of on the same level as the occult or magic that is supposed to contradict it, while instead that is absolutely not true. So this guide clears that up as well, that it is not on the same plane. It is not a magic against magic, but is a prayer which comes from God and is against the power of the devil.
Well, Hannah, thanks so much for coming on. We always appreciate your insight. Hannah Brockhouse, senior Rome correspondent for Catholic News Agency. Thanks again, Hannah.
You're welcome.
Coming up, pro-lifers ask the Food and Drug Administration to remove an abortion pill from the market. And Representative John Lewis is laid to rest in Atlanta. The Supreme Court in Mexico has overturned a lower court's ruling that could have opened the door to legalized abortion. Pro-lifers gathered outside of the court building to celebrate the decision. Those in favor of abortion criticized the justices, saying they failed to address the issue. Abortion in the first 12 weeks is allowed only in Mexico City and in one state in the South. For more on this story, including what pro-lifers in the country are saying, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Here in the U.S., nearly 24 pro-life leaders are asking the head of the Food and Drug Administration to remove the abortion pill mifepristone from the U.S. market. In a letter to FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn, they urge him to exercise statutory authority to, quote, classify the abortion pill as an imminent hazard to the public health that poses a significant threat of danger. Abortion advocates have attempted to stop FDA regulations of the abortion pill regimen during the pandemic. Catherine Hadro, host of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, joins me now to take a look at this and other pro-life issues in the news. Catherine, welcome back. Always good to see you.
It's great to see you, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
Well, the letter goes on to talk about the harm this drug poses to women, something that I know you've covered quite a bit. Can we talk about that?
Absolutely. The abortion pill is dangerous. And this letter does take a significant step because we've seen pro-life leaders in recent months call on the FDA to not loosen restrictions on the abortion pill. But now they're saying it's time to take it off the market. Here's the thing. During this pandemic, we've really seen the abortion industry push for the abortion pill in an unprecedented way. They really are pushing for it and manipulating women because, as you and I and we all know, there's a lot of fear and anxiety and uncertainty right now, and the abortion industry is really preying on women during this time in unplanned pregnancies to push the abortion pill. But the abortion pill, which is when women go home without medical supervision, take 2 pills which end the life of their child, that poses some very serious and unique physical and psychological risks. So why now, when our healthcare industry is maxed out and taxed out, are we wanting to put women in this potentially risky situation? That is not pro-woman.
Well, Catherine, we've also been following efforts on Capitol Hill by some Democratic lawmakers to undo longstanding pro-life legislation like the Hyde Amendment. What's your reaction to that?
Yes, we are seeing, again, unprecedented pressure on the Hyde Amendment in recent months and really in recent years. Just recently, House Democrats have introduced an amendment to repeal the Hyde Amendment from this year's spending bill. Just as a reminder to viewers, the Hyde Amendment is added onto the spending bill every year, and it bans the taxpayer funding of abortions through Medicaid reimbursements. Since it was introduced in 1976, it's long enjoyed bipartisan support. It's passed every single year, but now we're seeing a lot of pressure to repeal it and take it away, even from Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, who has previously long supported the Hyde Amendment. Even he now is saying he would support repealing it. But we know that the Hyde Amendment has saved over 2.4 million lives and is worth defending and protecting and should not be a partisan issue, which is why, to give a little preview of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly tonight, this week's call to action is to urge your member of Congress to protect the Hyde Amendment, and viewers can do that simply by going to prolifeweekly.com.
Well, Catherine, we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to talk about this quickly. A story that I know that you've been reporting on a lot, the move by Planned Parenthood to try and distance itself from its founder, Margaret Sanger, and her racist viewpoints. What do you make of the action, and what are you hearing from pro-life leaders about that?
Well, I'll keep it brief. It's not so much an action as much of an admission that we've all long known that Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was a eugenicist who believed in population control and that some people are, quote, unfit. And simply removing her name from a building is not enough. And pro-life leaders tell me this is not enough because you cannot divorce an ideology from Planned Parenthood's business today, because Sanger's belief that some babies are better off dead continues to live on in every Planned Parenthood abortion facility every day. It's not enough, but I hope more people are aware of Sanger's ideology.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing more on this topic on your show tonight. And a reminder that you can watch EWTN Pro-Life Weekly Thursdays at 10 p.m. And for other airing times, visit EWTN.com. The funeral for Congressman John Lewis took place this morning at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. Martin Luther King Jr. was the former pastor at Ebenezer Baptist, a landmark in civil rights history. Former Presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush paid their respects. Congressman Lewis died on July 17th. He was 80 years old. Up next, a congressman from Illinois tells us how he uses his Catholic faith while working on Capitol Hill. According to the Pew Research Center, there are currently 163 Catholic lawmakers in the U.S. Congress. In our series, Faith in Politics, we seek to explore how politicians say their faith impacts their work. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
Republican Congressman Rodney Davis didn't grow up Catholic, but when I sat down with him, Davis shared the significance it plays in his life now and the special significance that it played during a life or death moment.
We're not just here because of us, we're here because of God's blessing.
A convert to Catholicism when he was 31, Illinois Republican Rodney Davis has a crucifix from his home parish hanging in his office to remind him of what's important.
It's positioned to where every time I leave my office, it's the last thing I see before I go meet with a constituent, before I go home, or before I go cast a vote on the House floor.
He tells me House Chaplain Father Patrick Conroy helps nourish his faith.
My faith has expanded through interactions with my fellow members of Congress. And there are times that my faith is tested.
A big test for Congressman Davis's faith came on June 14, 2017, here in Alexandria. The Republicans were practicing for the annual congressional baseball game. Congressman Davis was up at bat when a gunman opened fire. And that day, still wearing bloody-stained clothes, he thanked the officers who defended them.
Capitol Police that were injured too. They're the heroes. They're the ones that saved us because they were able to fire back at this maniac.
He shared with me what that moment meant for him.
Because of my experience in that mass violent shooting, there's no one I respect more than our law enforcement officers.
And he says it was divine intervention that saw them through.
If people didn't believe in God before our baseball shooting, you have to look at too many coincidences that happened that day. What are the odds that that was the day that the trauma surgeon who put the tourniquet on Steve Scalise's hip that allowed him to get to that hospital with 0 blood pressure rather than already perished? You know, some people may call it a coincidence. I call it a blessing.
Recently, I was asked by Congressman Davis and a number of other lawmakers for morning mass here on Capitol Hill. It was a wonderful experience. Congressman Davis tells me every morning he picks up the phone and opens up the daily reading and prays. From the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, tomorrow, Catholic lawmaker and House Minority Whip Steve Scalise talks with Eric, recounting how his faith strengthened him on that fateful morning 3 years ago. Finally tonight, today is the feast day of Blessed Solanus Casey, a Capuchin friar who died in 1957. Blessed Solanus spent years in Detroit. His final resting place is at the Solanus Center there. Before he died, Solanus spent time as the doorkeeper at the St. Felix Catholic Center in Huntington, Indiana. He had a special devotion to the Blessed Virgin and often prayed to her after working a 12-hour day. A story in the current edition of the National Catholic Register describes how one pilgrim clearly felt his presence during her visits to Huntington. Blessed Solanus Casey, pray for us. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.